What was Michael Jackson's connection to organized crime and kidnapping?
Did Lou Reed beat his children to get them to cry on his track, The Kids?
Hey everybody, this is Big Randy with the Smarts Project. I've provided security and transportation for some of the biggest names in the music industry.
I'm John. I've been a musician for over 20 years, playing everything from metal and punk to bluegrass and country.
We're bringing you a podcast about some of the weirdest myths and legends that the music industry has to offer. This is Tall Tales and Music Mythology.
Hey everybody, this is Big Randy with the Smarts Project. Welcome to the podcast. Appreciate you taking the time to come over and listen to us. And now on the business end of the studio, spinning the ones and twos is my friend, Mr. Jonathan Glove.
Hello, everybody.
You doing all right, brother?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Man, a little fat and ugly, but I'll make it.
So no different.
In the music news, Steven Tyler announces solo tour with Nashville's Loving Mary Band.
Huh?
Did you hear
about this? No.
Actually, it's equal parts interesting yet horrifying. Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler announced today that he is hitting the road with Nashville's Loving Mary Band as a backing group. And everywhere that I researched 3 different places to get this information, and but I think it's part of that cut and paste journalism, because everybody said Nashville's Loving Mary Band. So I don't know if the name of the band is Nashville's Loving Mary Band or it's Loving Mary Band from Nashville. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. It looks like it is just the Loving Mary Band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I've never heard of them. I don't know.
I haven't either, but I can't help but think if they're playing with Steven that, they've
got to be somewhat of a big deal at least. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, they got to be at least as good as I am, probably better. A 13-date tour is comprised of headlining shows, festival gigs, and benefit concert in Akron, Ohio for a children's hospital, which he's really big about helping kids out like that. I really. Yeah. He's kind of like if Captain Jack Sparrow had like a little alcoholic brother, the way that Johnny Depp does, the kids.
Right.
Yeah, that's how come you never see them both in the same room at the same time. But the mini tour is in support of Steven's debut solo LP, We're All Somebody from Somewhere, which is a great name, and was released back in 2016 after Steven signed a deal with Scott Borchetta at Big Machine Label Group. And I have yet to meet Scott Borchetta. I tried a few times to get a hold of him to have a sit down with him. He's down in Nashville now, and I've never met him. I've never had any kind of communication with him outside of me sending him communication. But I got some friends of mine that know him that say he is a complete wanker.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe we'll do an episode about it one time, but I've got some friends of mine who that had some dealings with him in his past, as well as his father in his past, and apparently, that apple didn't fall far from the tree. But I'm just saying what I heard. I never met the man. He might be gold for all I know. But just from what I heard. So the album hit number 1 on Billboard Top Country Albums chart and entered the top 20 of Billboard's 200 albums chart. Steven will also be joined on select dates by rock music duo The Sisterhood Band, which is comprised of Rod Stewart's daughter Ruby Stewart and Alyssa. I know I'm going to screw this up, and I swear it's an accident. Alyssa Bonagura, who is the daughter of Kathy Bailey and Michael Bonagura. Did I say the last name right?
Oh, dude, I have no clue. I don't know. I've never heard that name before, so I wish I could tell you, but I have no clue.
Oh. Well, I can't help it. It's a cool name. If I'm saying it right, that's a balls name right there. I mean, Jesus Christ, no wonder the guy's married. But the tour kicks off June 12th and will make stops in New York City, London, Madrid, and more.
Gotcha.
So
cool.
I really have ever had anything bad to say about Steven Tyler.
No.
years ago, when I was half the man that I am now. Quite literally, I was under 200 pounds.
Jeez.
But I was on the road with them for it's about 14 weeks, I guess.
Yeah.
13 weeks, something like that. And I was around him quite a bit, but I had very little interaction with him. But I never had a bad interaction with him, even at his worst.
That's
what
cool.
I seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ears. He was just professional the whole way. Could not
good
say
to
enough
hear.
good stuff about him.
That's really cool, and he always seems like a pretty nice guy. And I know he's, like you mentioned, he's really involved with charitable work and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. That's always good to see.
And I think that's happening more the older that he gets. And maybe everybody does that. The older you get, the
that
more
could
you
very well be.
kind of prioritize shit in life.
Right,
And
exactly.
I got a friend of mine, Anita Langford, that she is huge Steven Tyler fan. Would not piss on Aerosmith if they were on fire, but loves some Steven Tyler. Excuse me. And it's not like she's mad at him or anything. It's just she don't give a shit about nobody except for Steven Tyler. And I see pictures every once in a while of him on social media or on the web or whatever, and it looks like he's somebody's like hungover grandmother,
Right.
And I'll send pictures to her and I go, hey, I saw this picture of this really nice lady online. I thought you'd like it, And screw you, Randy Rosenberg.
Yeah, he's getting up there in age though, so he's gonna start looking a little different now. But
yeah, well, I'll give him one thing though, and there's a couple of guys. There's only two of them come to mind now, but I'm almost positive there's more. But I put him in the same category as like Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger. I read an article somewhere that he actually runs 12 miles during a concert.
Oh, huh.
Because they got those massive stages,
right.
And during the entire concert, I think that he had like a Fitbit on or some shit like that, and it said that he ran like a total of like on an average, or I think it was of like 12 miles a concert.
I'd like to look that up. That's interesting because dude moves around the whole time. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But did you hear about how much he works out? This dude, man, look, you find a personal trainer and put him up against him. And I bet you I would put money on, I ain't a gambling man, but I'd put money on Mick Jagger. This brother, he does, I think he does like tantric yoga, and he jogs like something crazy, like 5 miles. He's got like a workout regimen that he does like with, static weights and all kinds of stuff, and he does it twice a day.
That's crazy. Jeez.
Yeah, so in other words, this brother runs more in a day than I will probably drive.
right.
In a day. Now, I mean, before, not before, but now, now that I ain't driving a big truck or buses. So anyway, on the other thing I wanted to get to on the news was this is what I was going to talk to you about before, but I was like, screw it, save it for the podcast. So I was past couple of days I was doing some research. We have a crazy amount of people in Australia that follow the show, and we're really grateful for it.
Yeah,
as confused as we are about it, as confused as I am. Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah, absolutely. But so because of that, I wanted to add in, a little bit of stuff that's a little bit more relevant to them, and not just being stupid American folk and being arrogant and talking about our stuff. So one of the things that popped up is that there's a music venue in Melbourne called the Brunswick Hotel, and it's as far as like any big city, they're going to have a local music venue that is like real prestigious to play there, and that's one of those places in Melbourne.
Okay,
and so apparently. What's great to hear is they have horrible drivers just like us, and which is comforting. But apparently there was some person that had a little bit too confident in their driving abilities and had hit a fire hydrant directly in front of the Brunswick Hotel.
Oh, man.
And so it flooded out the entire first floor. And yeah, so
wow.
they had to close it down for an indefinite amount of time. And, I've said it before, I'll say it now, and I'll say it probably till my dying day. Hopefully it's later than tomorrow, that, you might not like what me and John say, but we ain't fake. There ain't no fake stuff. There ain't no nothing. So you and I both know that they got insurance for this shit. And, they're going to, this is in Melbourne. This isn't in Podunk, West Virginia or something. This is in Melbourne. Right. I'm almost, this is a very established music venue. I'm almost positive they have insurance, so that's not the issue. But what the issue is there was a pretty large amount of people that work there, and you and I both know that staff that work at music venues, their hours aren't guaranteed, and even when they were working, they're probably not making a whole lot of money. So they had the Brunswick Hotel had a fundraiser, and it was called the Brunswick Hotel Presents Flood Aid, which I thought, whoever came up with that name, bro, you're hearing it from my mouth. That was freaking genius. Okay, I don't care what anybody says, and I hope that that's not trademarked, because that's an awesome freaking name. So, but this was last night. So, I read, it was Saturday, April 7th. So what they were supposed to do is they were having a benefit concert to help out the staff that works there, because they're going to be out of work for, an undisclosed amount of time, because they got to get the place fixed, So, they said, this is part of an article I was reading. It says the owners aren't giving it up that easy, though, organizing a massive fundraiser this Saturday, April 7th at the nearby Rubik's Warehouse, featuring the likes of Flying Colors, China Beach, Two-Headed Dog, and a stack more. So a stack more, that must be like the Australia version of a shit ton.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm guessing too. Yeah,
whole bunch more. Yeah. So anyway, they this is an ongoing fundraiser, and I think it's a pretty good cause. And you got kids that are hungry out there, and you got schools that need to be funded, and they got nuclear proliferation and all that. But you know what? You can't solve one big thing at a time. You just try to spread it out. So, for anybody living in that area, and hell, even if you don't live in that area, if you're somebody that, you got a couple of dollars and you can help out folks that, with a situation like this, that'd be really great. And the way you could do that is you can go brunswickhotel.net, and that is the direct website for the folks there, and you can read all about it. And they got links to the news articles and stuff like that. And I just thought it was a really shitty thing that happened, and it wasn't like, somebody, there wasn't like a terrorist bomb go off or something like that.
It was an accident, but it still sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really nice that I don't. Maybe they pay their staff a shit ton of money. I don't know. I can't help but think if they were, that they were not going to be doing a fundraiser though. So
right.
But anyway, anybody that could help out, that would be really cool. So, you got anything before we get started?
Well, two quick things. It's been a while since we did our last episode, but I talked about in the music news section. I talked about the that Stevie Ray Vaughan owned Fender Broadcaster.
Oh yeah.
And I double checked my facts on that one. The Broadcaster was released in the fall of 1950. I thought it was 1951. So again, that's just a quick little correction on that one there. So I was barely off. But the name was also, I mistaken about why the name was changed. I knew it was something to do with a trademark issue. It was changed from Broadcaster to Telecaster because Gretsch was using the name Broadcaster for a line of drums.
Oh, I'll be damned.
So I knew there was a reason why they had to change it. I just couldn't remember what it was. And so, Leo Fender still decided to use a name that had a television related motif. Telecaster. And the only other thing was during your portion, the Sid Vicious part of the story, you mentioned his mother was a registered drug addict in the UK, and you said, hey, do they have anything like that in the US? I didn't think they did. Kristen was listening to it and mentioned that actually some states have a meth registry. And what it is, and this is in the U.S., of course, if someone is on it, they're prevented from buying meth precursors.
That's right. I remember having that conversation with her about that.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. So that's why they scan driver's license. Is to see if you're on that registry, or if you've bought like if you go and buy Sudafed,
Right.
they scan your driver's license, and it's to try to prevent people from buying meth or buying Sudafed to produce meth. So they do have something
Right.
kind of like a drug user registry here, but a little bit different. So that's all.
Yeah,
I've got.
yeah.
Just those two little quick corrections there. So
Wow, that's kind of cool. God, I hate having a shitty memory. God darn it. So, because God, I remember having that conversation with her, and that was the exact context that we brought it up. Is that her saying? I mean, she's smart. Look, anybody that doesn't know John's wife, you're missing out because this woman, she's smart. But she's like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of like here in the U.S. You can't buy. Like, I don't know, roofing tar and Sudafed or some other, I don't know.
Right.
She named off a handful of things. And, like, I would be a horrible drug addict because I didn't even know you use some of those things to make drugs. But I'm trying to be a better meth head. So anyway, my story is about Michael Jackson and the song Beat It. And it actually started off as the song itself. And then I found out some really cool facts about the video. And then I was like, okay, well, screw it. I'm just going to go over to the video then. And then I was, no, screw it. I'll just do both of them. So it's a lot of information. I'll just power through this as fast as I can, as much as my stuttering ass can do. So y'all bear with me on this. So the song Beat It was created and performed by Michael Jackson in 1982 for his sixth solo album, Thriller. Oh, another thing I wanted to inject here is that one thing that I in designing the Smarts project, one thing that I used as an example of a lot of things was this very song.
okay.
In '84, the best-selling video was the making of Thriller. And it wasn't any movie. It wasn't, a cartoon.
Really?
It was the making of Thriller. Yeah. So there was a lot of unusual things that happened with this, good things that happened with the song and the video that really kind of popped out. And, there was things like this and We Are the World and things like that. And those are some of the examples that I used whenever I was designing the Smarts Project program.
Cool.
So anyway, it was released on St. Valentine's Day in 1983 as the album's third single. Beat It received, and this is just a handful of awards that it got, but it got the 1984 Grammy Award for Record of the Year. Mm-hmm. This one is confusing, but Best Male Rock Vocal Performance. I know. Rock vocal, okay. All right. I'm not arguing. I don't make the news. I just report it. 2 American Music Awards. It was inducted into the Music Video Producers Hall of Fame. The single, along with its music video, helped propel Thriller into becoming the best-selling album of all time. Right. And there was one of those things. I can't wait till I know what I'm actually doing with this podcast thing. But I was going to check and double check if that's still the case, and I never did do it. But
if it's
I'm
still
almost
the number
positive.
one best-selling album.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah, it still is.
Oh, okay. Look at me. Oh, we can just cut this shit out. Yeah, take this out in post, John. Just like they do on the big podcast. The single was certified platinum in the United States in '89. Rolling Stone placed Beat It on 344th spot of its list of 500 greatest songs of all time, which I thought that was kind of low. But
yeah, it kind of surprises me. I figured that'd be higher.
I don't really have the other 343 above it memorized, but
right.
It just feels kind of low. But the song was also ranked number 81 on Rolling Stone's 100 greatest guitar songs of all time, which is kind of cool that a pop song would be, one of the 100 greatest guitar songs of all time. Right. But so the song is legendary because it involves one of the greatest guitar players of the day, Eddie Van Halen, and his alleged kidnapping. Do you remember hearing that?
No, I don't know about a kidnapping. Obviously, I knew Eddie Van Halen played the solo on it because we've talked about that before.
Right. Well, there was a rumor. There was a story going by because you got people that don't understand, old guys, back me up on this. But there was a rumor. Now, mind you, we didn't have cell phones and, the interwebs and all that stuff, but So really the only way that we got music news was either through the rags like Rolling Stone or, whatever music magazine you're reading, or MTV or VH1.
Right.
So, and even in the music world, MTV and VH1 is just as biased as Fox and CNN, even back in the day.
Right.
So, this was, because you got to figure that Michael Jackson was the first black artist to get regular airplay on MTV. So, it's kind of like a sign of the time. So not that they're, trying to push an agenda or something, but
no,
it's just, that's the way it was,
Right,
so,
right.
They left out certain things, So, anyway, there was a rumor that was going around, and I never heard it in any MTV or VH1 thing. I never read it in any of the magazines. I always heard it from like a dude that would like always look around and check over his shoulder before he said, "Hey man, you know what I heard?" And then he would, tell me the story. And I heard that there was a van that, went and kidnapped Eddie Van Halen and, threw him in the back, and look, the only way that you're going to see your family again is if you play this lick. Now looking back as a security guy, that's preposterous.
Right.
What are the odds that he's going to be in a position by himself that could actually happen, first of all.
Exactly.
But anyway, that was a rumor going around, and you didn't know anything else. So, you just kind of like, well, maybe it did happen. But the video was important because it allegedly cast a small amount of gang members from Los Angeles and the insistence of the LAPD to close the set due to gang tension. This won the 1983 Grammy Awards for Record of the Year and Best. Oh, I already said that part. He also co-produced. What's his face? Jeez, I can't think of. There was another guitar player I was bringing up, and I made a note to put in this thing. Anyway, Michael also co-produced a song with Quincy Jones and invited Eddie Van Halen to play the song's distinctive hardcore solo guitar. Quincy said that when he called Eddie Van Halen to play the solo guitar, I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to play. The reason you're here is because of what you do play." So that's what he did. He played his ass off. That was from Quincy Jones. Nice. Eddie connected to Quincy through Ted Templeman, who was Van Halen's producer and friends with Quincy Jones. So Ted Templeman, I want to say, did the 1984 album, if I remember right. And I think he may have had something to do with Diver Down, too. I'm not entirely sure on that one.
Gotcha.
But when he initially contacted Quincy Jones, Eddie thought he was getting a prank call. Like he was like really, because they never met. Eddie and Michael never met. So they had no reason to ever meet. These are two genres of music, and back then it wasn't like you had anything against the other genre. It's just that why would you hang out with each other?
Right? Exactly.
So anyway. It was good timing because Eddie's bandmates were out of town, so they couldn't really give him any shit for taking on yet another project. And at the time, they had a rule that they were, and this was OG Van Halen. This is with Dave whenever Dave was on it, and they had a rule that nobody does anything outside of Van Halen without all four of them agreeing on it, or at least being notified of it first. But everybody was out of town. He was the only one that was in town.
Gotcha.
So everybody was out of town, and he says, I was a complete fool according to the rest of the band, our manager, and everyone else. But I was not used. I knew what I was doing. I don't do something unless I want to do it. Eddie recorded his contribution following Quincy and Michael arriving at the guitarist's house with a skeleton version of the song. You're going to love this part. Steve Lukather recalled, initially we rocked it out in Eddie's house, and he played a good solo, but Quincy thought it was too tough. So I'm not entirely sure what that means. Maybe too much
too
distortion.
Technical.
No, it was too tough. Like it sounded too tough guy tough.
Okay, too aggressive, maybe, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe like too much distortion or whatever.
I doubt it, because Eddie Van Halen is known for not using hardly any distortion. Honestly.
Oh, so, well, then again, this is yet another case of me not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. So Eddie recalled, quote, Eddie, everybody was out of town, and I figured, who's going to know if I play on this kid's record? I didn't want anything. He figured nobody would ever know it was him on the record.
That's hilarious.
now we have the benefit of hindsight, so we can look back on it and we can listen to it, whether you knew that Eddie played lead on it or not, and you can listen to it and go, well, there's nobody else that could have ever played that at the time.
Yeah,
now
very
we've
distinctly,
but now we've got 12-year-old kids that are doing this, on the stage with Steel Panther,
Right.
but at the time, it was a different time. So, he says I didn't want anything. Maybe Michael will give me a dance lesson someday. So according to Eddie, he had to engineer restructure the song to accommodate his solo, and then he blasted out 2 takes. Mind you, this is in Eddie's house with Steve Lukather. So Michael showed up after the second take and was thrilled that Eddie cared enough about the song to rework it. And Eddie was like really cool about reworking it. And then whenever he looked up and he saw Michael walk in, he was like, oh shit, I'm messing with this kid's song. He's probably going to be mad.
Right.
So he was like, in fact, he was on, what's that CNN show with that little English twit?
Piers Morgan?
Yeah. So it was there was an interview with LL Cool J and Eddie Van Halen, and they had multiple things they were talking about. But this is one of the things that Eddie was talking about on the interview, and he says, "Yeah, I was really into it. Like I dug it, and I'm reworking it. And then I looked up and I saw Mike walk in, and he was like, "Oh God, this kid's probably going to be mad because I'm messing with his song,"
Right.
Which is funny. 2 legendary people, but again, we have the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
So Eddie told CNN during that interview I was telling you about with Pierce, what's his face? He was a musical genius with childlike innocence. He was such a professional and such a sweetheart. According to Rod Temperton, who wrote the title track to Thriller, a mystery blaze broke out in the control room as Eddie Van Halen played his guitar solo. This gets so much better. I swear to you, it gets so much. You're going to love this. This is so 1980s Van Halen. Eddie was playing and the monitor speakers literally caught on fire, recalled Temperton in a Q magazine interview.
Oh, wow.
The speaker caught fire and we were all thinking like, wow, this must be really good, this solo. So the technicians had to race in the control room with fire extinguishers and put it out. Now, are you familiar with Bruce Swedien?
No, that didn't ring a bell.
Bruce Swedien is like one of the biggest most successful producers. He's like my buddy Joe Carroll and John Mathis, and but he's one of the longest running successful producer careers ever. He has multiple programs that he's been on. I think he has his own YouTube channel now, come to think of it. But anyway, he says that he was in awe of Eddie Van Halen's powerful guitar solo, but he didn't dare record it himself. He heard him warming up on it.
Yeah.
And even warming up, he was louder than what he was going to be in the studio. So what he wanted him in the studio, but he also knew that he couldn't control the volume in the studio. So what he did, fearing the blast would damage his hearing, he left the studio while Eddie was still warming up. It was so loud that he would never subject his hearing to that kind of volume level. So he didn't. He hired an engineer. He says he's new, and I figured his hearing would probably be a little suspect right now anyway. So he said that he then did the mix after it was recorded. When Van Halen's 1984 album rose to number 2 in America for 3 weeks in March of 1984, the only thing that kept it from being number 1
was Thriller.
That's funny. Yeah, and he said that everybody in the band was chewing his ass all the time because, bro, we could have been number 1, but no, Mr. Honky Tonk over here got to be playing over on somebody else.
That's funny.
So Weird Al did a parody, and for anybody that's not familiar, anybody outside of John, because I know you know everything that he's done.
Yeah, Eat It was the song.
Yeah, Eat It. So do you know who played guitar on that one?
No. Was it Eddie Van Halen on that one too?
No, it's Rick Derringer.
Oh, okay, because he recorded the album that was on, Weird Al in 3D.
Oh, I lost you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. He recorded that album too. Weird Al in 3D.
Oh, I lost you again.
Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that's on your end and not mine.
I don't know.
Yankovic also did a video for the song where he appeared dressed up like Mike, but he had a pretty voracious appetite. Yeah. Weird Al said that Michael Jackson had a great sense of humor, and he gave him permission to do the parody. Nice. And apparently this gave him a lot of validation to other artists who had a hard time declining a parody whenever Michael Jackson said yes. Like, well, who the hell are you to say no?
Right, right. And what's funny there, too, is, you mentioned that speaker blew out while Eddie was recording that solo. At the end of the solo in Weird Al's parody, you hear an explosion, and in the music video, the guitar like catches on fire and it blows the guitarist away.
Shut your face! Is that right?
So I don't know if those two are related, but that'd be pretty funny if it was. I don't know if it is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that'd almost be worth researching it, man. Yeah. So part of Mike's legacy was his crossover success with white audiences, something that many Motown artists achieved before, but Mike was really just taking it to a new level. Right. He was the first black artist to get regular airplay on MTV, and this song helped to expand his audience further by bringing in some of Van Halen's listeners, which, to be honest with you, that's really kind of what drew me to him. Like, I knew who Mike was, and I knew what he came from.
Right.
And I liked what he was about, but at the time, I was a typical white kid in, Southern Indiana. I'm listening to Leonard and Van Halen and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
But on the flip side, I kind of had like my alter ego, that I'm listening to Slick Rick and Kool Herc and stuff like that. So there really wasn't a whole lot of cream filling in the middle to connect the two, and Eddie was kind of, for me, Eddie was one of those connectors that really connected the two,
Oh, interesting.
But
gotcha.
Beat It was the key track on Michael's rise to superstardom. The music video for the song was one of the most popular and memorable of the MTV era. Mike became the first black artist to get regular airplay on the network whenever Billie Jean was in rotation. But when the clip, whenever Beat It was delivered, both videos were in hot rotation for much of the summer of 1983. And man, I remember that. Oh man, that was a hot summer, brother. I mean, because music was, I don't know, maybe that was just like everybody's got that 1 or 2 years in their life whenever they're a teenager that they remember that time for the rest of the like all of the music and all that stuff. I guess maybe that was mine, but I remember that. Man, that was good music came in. We had some pretty shitty stuff too, but mainly it was really good music. But Mike came up with Thriller with his producer Quincy Jones, and who Quincy encouraged him to write something like My Sharona, which was like his version of My Sharona, which was a huge hit for the Knack back in 1979. Right. For anybody that's not old enough to know that stuff, which I actually think we talked about that. Didn't you do an episode on that?
I sure did.
That's right. Hey, check me out. Remembering shit. So Mike is quoted in Rolling Stone magazine Top 500 Songs issues as saying this: I wanted to write a type of song that I would go out and buy, but also something totally different from the rock music I was hearing on Top 40 radio. So about 2 minutes and 45 seconds into the song, there's an audible knocking noise just before Eddie Van Halen starts the guitar solo. You remember that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay. Rumors were that an angry and drunk Eddie made the noise, that he was telling the assistant producer to fuck off, or that it was the sound of his guitar tremolo being bent. Huh. And those two particular little rumors or myths, that kind of added a little validity to the kidnapping rumor.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
Finally, he's like, that's it, I've had enough, and, people had this impression of Eddie being this crazy guy locked in the corner of a room, with like a 6-pack of cheap beer, play it and we'll give you good beer and let you go or something.
Yeah.
But he said the truth is more mundane, as it was an intentional sound created by Mike banging on a drum case. Huh. Check this out. On the Thriller credits, and I looked at this, and this is for real.
Okay.
On the Thriller credits, Mike is listed on Beat It as drum case beater.
No shit.
That's funny. So now I don't know how somebody with talent would translate this, but people in my particular situation, that really puts hope in my heart that I can actually be on an album sometime soon.
That's funny.
So The lyrics are about life in the streets and gang activity, something that Mike was absolutely 100% detached from. He was schooled by tutors his whole life and became a star at a really young age with the Jackson 5. So his interpretation of two gangs coming together to rumble was based on a celluloid interpretations that he'd seen, more specifically West Side Story, which used gangs as musical art. So just
Makes
a quick catch up.
sense.
Yeah. Oh, you never heard that?
No, but that does make a whole lot of sense. Like,
Yeah.
that music video, I could definitely see that being directly, very heavily influenced by West Side Story or anything like that.
Yeah, really, just like a modern version of it, almost. So for people that just a quick catch up, West Side Story was a 1957 musical that was made into a popular movie in 1961. And some of the first dialogue heard in the movie is a scene where some of the gang members have encroached onto rival territory, and an empathetic line, "Beat it." So the song, and especially the video of "Beat It," have been idolized, covered, and even parodied by a variety of artists since its first appearance on TV. The little-known fact about "Beat It" is that Michael Jackson had a unique idea that he wanted to incorporate in the music video. The cost of the video was $150,000, which at that time, not only was that crazy money, because you got to figure that was probably $300,000-$400,000 of today's money,
Right.
but they weren't dropping even if there wasn't adjustment for inflation, they weren't putting money into videos. Like now we have videos that they're making that cost well over $1 million.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And at the time, videos were just coming out, and the old school guys in the music industry, they were like, look, man, this is a fad. Videos are never going to last. This is not going to be a thing, But Mike really kind of took a hold of the handlebars and really wanted to take off with it, He did it with this, but then Thriller, that's whenever he lost his shit. And that's whenever, I think that was the first $1 million video, wasn't it?
That I'm not sure. That would make sense. I know that was the most expensive video at that time. I don't know what the cost was, but...
Yeah, I want to say that was like the first $1 million video. That's really reaching back into the memory bank there. But anyway, the cost of the video was $150,000, and it was filmed mostly in a variety of locations near East Fifth Street in Los Angeles, California, but mainly in a particular warehouse, which the rest of this story takes place at. Mike wanted to improve the relationship between two rival gangs which operated in the area. It was Bob Giraldi who directed the clip, which featured real gang members. Bob said that Mike asked to use members of the rival gangs, Bloods and Crips, as extras in the video, which they did. Mike wanted. You never heard this?
No. I mean, I figured that was just, well, so it's extras. You said people in the background. Okay, I guess that makes more sense then.
Well, I think originally he wanted them as dancers.
Ooh, yeah, good luck with that.
But it kind of makes sense the more I get into this. But anyway, Mike wanted the video for Beat It to be as realistic as possible. So, much to the unease of the director, Mike worked with the LAPD to recruit actual Bloods and Crips for the shoot.
Wow.
Bob Giraldi didn't like the idea because it was hard enough to direct actors and dancers, let alone hoods.
Right.
But more than 80 real gang members were cast and given the opportunity to appear in a video which revolutionized the pop rock industry. And that is no understatement at all. That really did set a new bar height for music, not just videos, but for music all around. So the effort was not without its problems, and the tension was thick. Bob said that on the first day of shooting, things got a little bit tense. So Bob had them shoot all of the scenes with the gang members on the first day. They shot. They got to the point where they had one last shot to do before the LAPD wanted to shut it down. In the end, when the choreographed dancing scenes took place with Mike and the other dancers, their remarkable talent changed contempt into grudging respect, and the gang members were actually applauding, and no one got hurt.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and whenever you see the YouTube videos of the interviews that they have, and they're actually showing clips of, somebody saying, well, I remember this one time in the video we were shooting this scene, and then they show that scene. Well, I remember that scene distinctly, like the rest of the video. But then whenever you hear the story behind that one scene might have taken it might have been 3 to 5 seconds on the video, but it took them like 7 hours to shoot it, and you're like, holy shit, like people almost died because y'all were trying to get that, 5 seconds of footage or whatever,
Right.
So attracted by the entertainment industry, later, many of the gang members decided to drop their criminal lifestyle and turned into professional dancers, which was friggin' awesome.
Huh.
I think that was Mike's intent was for that to happen, really.
That's cool.
Besides subjecting him to the hair-raising experience of working with actual LA street gangs in the video, the soft-spoken Mike also left director Bob Giraldi with a lasting bit of advice. You use the F word way too much. I guess the Crips and Bloods, this is Bob talking, I guess the Crips and Bloods started to get on each other's nerves after we had a few incidents, and 2 cops came to me and said they wanted to close it down. I somehow convinced the cop squad guy just to let me shoot the dance. I was going to hold the dance for the second night of shooting. I said, the only thing I can think of that'll save this is to just let me blast the music. I have a feeling it'll calm everything down. It can't get any worse. Just give me a chance. The cop was cool. He looked at me and said, okay, not much more though. I couldn't go much more because it was volatile, no question about it, and scary. So we were in the warehouse, change of plans. We're going to do the dance, get Mike out of the trailer. Here we go. The gang members couldn't dance, so they formed a ring and they watched, which all that, if you look in the video, that's in the video, but all that happened organically. That wasn't like, nobody told them to do that. That just happened organically. So the dancers all started to dance with choreographers Michael Peters and Vince Patterson, which are, at the time, they were really well-respected choreographers, but after this, these guys are friggin' legends, because they did Beat It, and they had both had something to do with Thriller, too. Yeah. When Mike comes down and does what he does, he says, I remember looking at the faces of all the Crips and Bloods lined up and their expressions as they listened to that music and watched those kids dance. Those kids were basically, most of them were gay, like all the dancers that they had hired.
Right.
And when they started to dance, the Crips and the Bloods had to look at it like, you know what? With all our wars and vendettas and stuff, this is cool right here. Yeah. That's something we'll never be able to do, and that's what made the evening work. He says, I met a man I have total respect for. One of the most interesting things he ever said to me, I'll never forget, we were arguing. He said to me in a very high-pitched voice that he has, use the F word too much. That will always stick with me. I thought that was a really smart thing to say at the time. He says, I watched a man dance better than anyone I've ever seen in my life. I watched a man talk softly and carry a tremendously big stick, and he got exactly what he wanted, and he got it his way. So that was the song in the video. You can see why I was kind of torn about it, because, there was, Eddie really wasn't kidnapped,
Right.
This, literally he admitted it took literally 20 minutes out of his life. He didn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
It happened in his own house, so I mean, how much more do you want? He didn't make a dime off of the, at least royalties, he didn't make a dime off it, but there was a couple of times, like he showed up a couple of times. You remember the Victory Tour?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there was a couple of times he met them, like whenever Van Halen and the Victory Tour crossed paths, that he went and he played that song with him live.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it was cool, but if you see the video, it's like pretty cringeworthy.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Yeah, but I think it was a combination of it was almost like, 5 seconds before you go out on stage and you think to yourself, oh shit, we haven't practiced any of this. I have no cues. I have no nothing. And plus it was kind of like the production value of the time,
Okay.
So nobody practiced anything. These are 2 guys from 2 completely different worlds of music. And, both of them are at the top of the food chain in their own right. And they have 2 completely different working styles and stage presence and all that shit. So it was really kind of cringeworthy, but it was, you also look at it and you go, well, this is a piece of history I'm looking at here, So the video quality was horrible.
Right.
But it was pretty cool. So the last thing I wanted to add into it, there was a couple of things that I found out that was really cool about this that didn't really fit into the story. We already talked about Steve Lukather that was on lead guitar. He played guitar. Steve Lukather, Steve Porcaro, and Jeff Porcaro, all three of these guys from Toto. Toto actually played more music on that album than any other band ever. Because,
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So Steve, which we're actually working on an interview that we're going to have with him sometime in the near future. But Steve played lead guitar on a vast majority of the songs on that album. And then, of course, Steve and Jeff Porcaro played synthesizer and drums respectively on that. Those guys, especially Steve Lukather, Luke looks at himself like, I'm just a session artist. That's it. And that's like we were talking before we hit record. We have a friend of ours, Bruce Watkins, that very successful session artist. And he always says, I'm just a session artist. Why would you want to have an interview with me? I'm just a session artist. Well, yeah, that's true. But, you've been on over 5,000 albums and, you were the band leader for Dolly Parton and you've done this and you've done that, and he's like, well, yeah, but I'm just a session artist, So that's the way that Luke looks at himself. And I've never met the Porcaro brothers, so I don't know how they are, but I would imagine they're not too far detached from that. So, the U.S. Department of Transportation used this song in messages to discourage drunk driving. In exchange, Jackson was invited to the White House where he met President Ronald Reagan. Huh. Jackson showed up in his sequin suit and sunglasses, which made for a pretty interesting photo with the president. So, do you remember seeing that picture?
No, I don't.
That was really, really weird. That reminded me a lot of whenever Elvis met Nixon.
Yep, that was the first thing I was thinking of too when you said that.
It really did. The song was featured in the 1989 film Back to the Future 2. Mm-hmm. When Mike reunited with his brothers for 2 shows at MSG, Slash from Guns N' Roses played guitar during the performance of this from Beat It and Black and White.
Gotcha, because he recorded the guitar for Black and White.
Right, mm-hmm. Right. And
that makes sense.
So I guess it was cheaper just to have one of, we can't afford both of them, so let's just get one guy to do both. I guess Slash was cheaper,
Yeah, no.
So the last one I got is Fall Out Boy recorded Beat It in 2008 for their album Live in Phoenix. Their version, which hit number 19 in the U.S., was first performed during the 2007 MTV Music Awards, excluding tracks that sample any of Mike's songs. It became the second highest charting remake of a Jackson song in Hot 100 history. Huh. The highest ranked cover of a Jackson original was SWV's 1993 melody of Right Here, Human Nature, which peaked at number 2. In this cover, Beat It, John Mayer joined Fall Out Boy performing Eddie Van Halen's part on lead guitar.
Oh, interesting.
So apparently John Mayer's a little bit underrated as a guitar. I knew he played good guitar.
Yeah, no, that dude's sick. I'm not a fan of John Mayer's music. It's just my taste. I'm not a fan of his musical style, but he is a sick guitarist. That guy is crazy good.
I had no idea.
Yeah, he so when he first came out, he just sounded kind of like a Dave Matthews also ran, just, a white boy with an acoustic guitar. And then he started playing like some bluesy stuff. I was like, oh, wait, this guy's pretty damn good. And he actually just came out with his own Paul Reed Smith signature guitar recently.
Oh, I'll be damned. Is that right?
Which really, it's just a Stratocaster with a Paul Reed Smith headstock on it, basically. I hate to say that, but it's true.
You are such a damn fun sucker. You know that?
But the thing is, you ask anybody who's seen it, and they'll, at first glance especially, I mean, it's undeniable that it looks exactly 100% the same. The only difference is the lower horn is scooped out, so it's a little bit easier to reach the higher frets. But I don't know. I'm sure it plays completely differently, but I don't know. I don't know. I'll try one out one of these days. They've got them at More Music, so.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We're going to take a quick break, and John's going to be right back.
All right. So, as I mentioned there at the top of the episode today, I'm doing a story about Lou Reed. Lou has remained, fairly unknown to a lot of casual music listeners, although obviously a lot. What's that?
Yeah, he really is. And actually, I heard that you were doing a story about him, and I was thinking I have people that I've worked for in the music industry that talk about him, but I don't really know anything. And then I started looking up, and like back in his like Ziggy Stardust days, when he's wearing the makeup and all that shit like Ziggy Stardust,
Oh, I was the Ziggy Stardust was David Bowie.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what I'm talking about when it was
yeah.
Velvet Revolver, I think it is, or
I know.
Is that the name of the band?
If I could reach through this microphone and smack you right now, I would. Dear God, no. Dear God, no. I'll just ignore that. Maybe I'll cut this out in post. I'm kidding.
You're a dick. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Go ahead, John.
So, while he has remained, fairly unknown to many casual music listeners, Randy included, he is undoubtedly one of the most influential artists of all time when it comes to actually influencing the course of music history. For instance, I'm not saying that punk would have never come about without Lou Reed, and in particular his band, The Velvet Underground.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good, dude. I'm just messing with you,
Oh, gosh.
But it's undeniable that they were one of the movement's biggest influence, especially them along with like Iggy Pop and the Stooges in America, and like Johnny Thunders and the New York Dolls. But the Velvet Underground were also arguably the single biggest influence on many of the 80s alternative rock movement acts, such as like the Pixies, Sonic Youth, Public Image Limited, which was Johnny Rotten's post-Sex Pistols bands, and just way, way, way too many other bands to mention here. I mean, it's impossible to overstate, the influence that Velvet Underground had on music, especially the indie and alternative rock bands of the 80s. Just crazy amounts of influence. And the band and Andy Warhol existed somewhat symbiotically, really. In other words, they both really contributed to the other's popularity. For instance, they served as the house band for many years at Warhol's Factory, which was the hippest of the hip hangouts in New York City, existing from 1962 to 1984. And a lot of people associate Andy Warhol more closely with Studio 54, and that's not wrong by any means, but the Factory was Andy Warhol's club, and it was simultaneously both like a club and a like an art exhibit, an ongoing art exhibit as well. And I never knew a whole lot about it until actually the Venture Brothers, one of my favorite Adult Swim cartoons, did an episode spoofing the Andy Warhol's Factory and like various people that hung out there. They were like like the Legion of Doom, but it was Andy Warhol's. They were called the Doom Factory, actually, is what they were called, and it was ridiculous. It's a great episode. I encourage anyone who's a fan of Andy Warhol and pop art and all that stuff to check that out, just because it's hilarious. But yeah, great stuff. So while the Velvet Underground was only active from 1965 to 1973, Lou Reed's solo career continued until his death in 2013. It should be noted, however, that Lou left the band on, shall we say, less than amicable terms in August of 1970 in the middle of a tour. I believe it was somewhere in Kansas is where he actually left the band. Like they were just right in the middle of a tour, because they're from, the band originates from New York City, of course. And we all do try to forget the album that he did with Metallica shortly before his death. God bless you, James Hetfield, for trying to make Lou more widely known, even if the experiment failed catastrophically. I mean,
the effort was there, though, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. And I definitely do say that it was with the best of intentions, but Jesus Christ, it was terrible. I don't know which one was worse, this album or Saint Anger, which was Metallica's 2003 album, because God, that's a mess too. But yeah. Either way, at least it gave Lou some promotion, so that's cool. And Lou Reed is just he was kind of a troll, really, in a way. I mean, he was notorious.
No.
Oh man, notorious for messing with the press. And we've talked about the movie the Velvet Goldmine before.
I think, yeah.
Which so basically, Velvet Goldmine, the main character in it is a mashup of David Bowie and Lou Reed.
Okay, yeah. I actually remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other character played by Ewan McGregor is more or less just Iggy Pop. I mean, there's I guess you could. There's a few other artists you could maybe throw in there too, but primarily Iggy Pop. So Lou Reed definitely played a big part in that movie's backstory as well. So Lewis Allen Reed, as he was born in 1942, courted controversy his entire career. He famously baited interviewers who questioned his sexuality, and this was a scene that probably the most Lou Reed-esque scene in Velvet Goldmine is a scene where they're interviewing the main character, I can't think of the main character's name, Brian Slade, I think it was. And he's just talking about, he's basically leading them on as to whether he's gay or not, and says something like, everyone's a little gay or something like that, and all this stuff. But in fact, Lou Reed's parents actually subjected him to electroshock therapy at a young age in an attempt to, quote, cure him of his homosexuality.
Oh, wow.
And that part actually was worked into the character of Kurt Wilde, which was the Iggy Pop-esque character in that movie too, because his character did get electroshock therapy. Songs in both the Velvet Underground and his solo career tackled topics such as drug use, promiscuity, and gender/racial discrimination. His live performances also went to great extremes, to say the least. This last part in particular is what I believe gives the most credence to this legend that I'm talking about today. Fortunately, even those familiar with Lou's massive body of work even for those unfamiliar with Lou's massive body of work, have likely heard his 1972 single, the David Bowie and Mick Ronson produced Walk on the Wild Side. And I can remember one of our radio stations in Kokomo, Z92.5, playing this song occasionally. Granted, the morning DJ, Mr. Alan Wake Me Up James, as he was known, pretty much had carte blanche to play whatever the hell he wanted in the mornings, but still, it's a little odd to hear that song as a 12-year-old kid on the bus to school. But right. I used to hear the song played on the radio in stores even. Of course, the line about transgender actress Candy Darlin giving beaches was censored. Speaking
what?
Yeah, the line, what was it? She never lost her
I
head,
know.
even
Yeah,
while
yeah.
she's giving it. Yeah. Speaking of Candy Darling, I actually mentioned her in the episode about Lola by the Kinks.
Right.
If you remember correctly, Ray Davies had gone on a date with her, and that was one of the rumors about the supposed inspiration for Lola. Of course, he said he already knew that she was transgender, so that was safely debunked. But as is often the case, I digress. So after Lou left his previous band in 1970, he spent the next year and a half working on his eponymous debut. Despite massive anticipation due to the Velvet Underground's increasing profile, Lou's self-titled album was somewhat of both a critical and commercial disappointment. Of course, as with any good, truly independent artist, Lou soldiered on completely unfazed. And 1973's Transformer pulled out what few stops you could ever accuse Lou Reed of having. Those are certainly few and far between, to say the least. This was actually the first Lou Reed solo album I ever listened to. I'd listened to the Velvet Underground and Nico, which is even if you've never heard the album, you've undoubtedly probably seen the album cover. It's just the Velvet Underground and Nico, it says on the front, and then it's a very Andy Warhol-esque banana. Like, you can tell it's like in his style of art.
Oh, right.
And he did indeed, of course, do the album artwork for that. But Transformer, that cover art too is just iconic as hell. And if that wasn't an inspiration for the Misfits logo, I don't know what the hell is. Because you look at that picture of Lou Reed on the cover of that album, and it looks almost exactly like the Misfits logo. So yeah, just check that out if you get a chance. I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Also, the The back cover of the album features a man and a woman where the man has a very noticeable erection. However, Lou claims this was due to literally stuffing a banana down the said man's pants.
I'll be damned.
That man was Ernie Tormelin, one of Lou's friends. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that tidbit. I promise you I did not know that. So that album was, as I mentioned earlier, produced by David Bowie and Mick Ronson. Mick, who was most famous for being Bowie's lead guitarist on his Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust albums. And the album, just like Ziggy Stardust, Tommy, and too many others from that era, can best be described as a rock opera, or better yet, just a concept album about a drug-addicted prostitute in this case. One of the more notable tracks on the album, aside from, of course, the aforementioned Walk on the Wild Side, is The Kids, which is a song about the album's heroine, pun intended, losing her children due to being an unfit mother. And at around the 5-minute mark, the unmistakable and very much not faked sound of screaming children can be heard. The children are crying and intermittently screaming for their mother. This, along with the blissful naivete of the general public in the early 70s, unaware of what havoc various engins provocateurs would bring, led to the rise of the belief that Lou had indeed beaten children to achieve this sound. Let me backtrack a little bit to explore this more earnestly, though. So, we've talked about punk in a decent amount of detail before. Not as much as a podcast dedicated specifically to all things punk might, but far more than your typical music podcast probably would.
True. Yeah.
So to really get in the mindset, perhaps a bit of backstory of what has come to be known as proto-punk is necessary. And proto, as in prototype, prototypical, early. So Iggy Pop and the Stooges are one of the earliest bands known for their incendiary live sets. Iggy himself can only be described as one crazy bastard. Yeah, it's true. You know how I mentioned Venture Brothers earlier? Love that show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Iggy was on there as one of David Bowie's assistants in the second season finale, which David Bowie is a recurring character on the show, although it's a little bit different after a while. But, it wasn't actually Iggy or Bowie playing themselves, and they even later, kind of changed the fact that that wasn't actually David Bowie. But I'm just going to stop that tangent right now before I go too far off the rails. Iggy was known for doing batshit crazy things like writhing around on broken glass or even puking on stage as though it were perfectly de rigueur. We've talked about artists like Mike Patton shitting on stage and stuff like that, but that was over 20 years after the fact. Iggy was doing this in the mid 60s.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not even going to go too much into depth about the insane shit, literally, that G.G. Allin was known for as well, which included literally throwing his own shit into the crowd. A feat that another one of my favorite bands, the Dillinger Escape Plan, their lead vocalist has done a couple of times as well. He shit in a towel on stage and said, see this? This is what you're going to see on this stage for the rest of the day, referencing like all the in his mind, terrible bands that were going to be playing this festival. It was a very interesting moment there, but once more, I digress. I just wanted to give, a little insight on just how crazy punk shows can get. And, my point being that punk artists, especially those in the early days, are far too often willing to push the envelope far past what a normal artist might consider. So let's start the speculation there at the beginning. Did Lou beat his kids? Well, unless parallel dimensions exist, Lou could not have beaten his kids because he had none.
No kidding?
No, Lou never had kids.
To the day he died, he never had kids.
No, unless they were illegitimate and everyone somehow kept their mouth shut. Dude never had any children. He was married for a very, very, very long time. I forget how long. I looked and I didn't write it down. But no, never had any children that at least that we're aware of. So the other part of the rumor is, I guess you could say that maybe he beat someone else's kids. And in this case, it's often mentioned that it was producer Bob Ezrin's children. Now, Bob Ezrin has a long, award-winning, multifaceted career. He's produced everyone from classics such as Kiss, Dr. John, Aerosmith, and Deep Purple, to modern acts like Army of Anyone, 30 Seconds to Mars, Deftones, and a personal favorite of mine, The Darkness. The fact is that this man has produced an insane number of great, or at least successful, acts. Keep in mind, those two aren't always the same thing. But Bob also has two sons, David and Josh, and it is these two who are most likely complicit in the production of this Lou Reed song. One other rumor has it that Bob, or Lou depending on the source, told the children that their mother had died in a car wreck. One version I found actually claimed that the children were told their mother and father died in the same car wreck, which would lead to the conclusion that either these are two of the dumbest children ever brought into this world if they weren't able to recognize their own damn father, or that Lou Reed's cruel ass subjected them to the mental anguish that accompanies the death of not one but two parents. The one thing I can safely say beyond the shadow of a doubt is that there are definitely two children wailing on the song. If you listen to it, I mean, you can tell there's definitely two different ones. Given the time frame, 1972, that the song was recorded, the technology to deepen the pitch of a vocal without changing its speed, or vice versa, didn't really exist. Hence, the existence of Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Okay.
So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's not really any way they could have changed the pitch without making it noticeably slower. So you listen to it and it's like, yeah, you can tell there's two different kids on here. So, as always, however, it's best if we can get the story straight from the proverbial horse's mouth. Rob Bowman, a man best described as an ethnomusicologist, interviewed Bob Ezrin for the 1992 box set Between Thought and Expression, the Lou Reed Anthology. In the liner notes for the set, he writes, according to Ezrin, the story is that he went home and told his 7-year-old son David that he was doing a play in the studio and he needed some kids' voices to sound scared because their mom was being taken away. The first few attempts didn't sound terrifying enough, but on a third, unprompted, his 2-year-old joined in and just started screaming. So the first kid, David, is screaming, and then just without even asking him, the second kid, the 2-year-old, Josh, just starts screaming. The two children... Credit. Yeah, right. The two children screamed so loud that they distorted the tape.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, like so many great myths and legends, we have a mix of truth and fiction. The fiction being that the kids are told their mother has been forcibly taken away, in this case by a mortal car accident. And the truth, which is that the kids were told to pretend their mother was being taken away. So... As with so many myths and legends that we cover, this story can almost unequivocally be written off as legend, although we do have confirmation that, there were someone involved with the recording's kids, doing the actual recording. Just, they were not beaten and they were not Lou Reed's. So
right.
It's a very interesting story to look into there. But yeah, so that was it.
I had actually heard that story.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
God, I don't know. When you get to be so old, it's like everything is 20 years plus, But,
right.
But I heard that story a long time ago. But, it's like I hear you say with a lot of artists and bands that we talk about that, I knew who Lou Reed was. I respected him as an artist. I was a typical person that, really the only thing I know is Walk on the Wild Side.
Right.
I really, to this day, I would really have a tough time, if my kids' lives depend on it, I'd have a tough time trying to come up with another song that he did. And hell, I even screwed up, was it Velvet Revolver? Not Velvet.
Yeah, because Velvet Revolver is the band that
don't
was,
hit me.
Scott Weiland. It was Scott Weiland with the Stone Temple Pilots and Slash.
Oh, that's right. Oh shit,
Yeah,
that's how come I know that name.
Revolver. Yeah.
So, I knew who he was and I liked him. Just wasn't a big fan of him, And
I understand.
All I knew was one song. But,
and I'm not trying to say like people who don't know who Lou Reed. If you don't know Lou Reed's body of work, you're not like a terrible person. You don't have like shit taste in music. I'm not trying to say that by any means, and I hope nobody takes it that way. Just Lou Reed is.
But yeah, that's what I was actually getting at. Is that even though I don't know his body of work, I know that he was really influential. I just didn't realize how influential he was until I heard that you were doing this story. And I was like, well, let me find out about this cat, and I started looking. I was like, son of a bitch.
Serious business. I mean, so many bands. There are so many bands out there who wouldn't have ever existed if it weren't for the Velvet Underground. I mean, just straight up. Yeah. Absolutely. Crazy. And then, you really can look at it. You can kind of extrapolate it to the point, I mentioned the Pixies. Velvet Underground was a huge influence on the Pixies, and Kurt Cobain himself mentioned several times that his favorite band was the Pixies. He even said something to the effect of he wished he could be in the Pixies. So
I'll be damned.
Without Lou Reed, we would never even had Nirvana either. So that's just how influential he really was, both directly and indirectly.
Huh.
Very, very interesting man, and made a lot of great music and pissed off a lot of people, and enjoyed every minute of it. I have no doubt. So
I gotta tell you, man, that as a music fan, I have mad respect for any artist in any genre that kind of like goes against the system or goes against the man type of thing, which that's one thing I really, really dig about punk. Not really the violent punk, because I don't condone any kind of violence, but but the just systematically, like Kurt Cobain was a perfect example of that. This is what you normally do? Oh, okay. Well, let me go out of my way and research to find out the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to do.
Exactly. And that's why I say, like, a lot of times punk isn't just necessarily a sound, it's also an ethos. I mean, you can have bands that very much do not sound like your stereotypical, 1-2 fuck you, 3-chord punk rock, but they really are punk as hell, just in their ethos. And that's very much Nirvana would fit into that category.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you got anything before we shut this mother down?
No, sir. That's all I've got.
All right. Well, music history doesn't end just because our episode is over with.
Anytime you've got a music myth or legend you would like to hear us talk about on the show, feel free to reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Tall Tales and Music Mythology, or on Twitter at T2M2 Podcast.
And anytime you want to get a hold of me on anything that has to do with the Smarts Project and what we can do for your high school music department, reach out with us on social media, on the Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And now more than ever, be kind to each other. Tell your kids you love them each and every day while you got them, and never be a myth.
Always be a legend.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Hey everybody, John here. If you'd like to hear me rant about other topics besides just music, check out the Gluff Nation podcast, where my brother and I tackle topics from politics, pop culture, and tech trends. Find us on YouTube, and we'll be bringing our rambling diatribes to iTunes and everywhere else podcasts are available soon. Thanks for listening.